Welcome everyone to What the Force, and welcome to our season 2 of Once Upon a Time in the Outer Rim. And with me today, and also for the rest of this season, is Ty Black.
Hello, Mando 2. So exciting.
Yeah, we've been waiting for this for a while. I think it really solidified when the gallery episodes happened. We both really appreciated everything that the creators had to say. It reaffirmed some of the things that we had literally covered in episodes about the Campbell's hero's journey, being brought out and at the forefront of the creators' minds, and then being able to talk about this episode by episode is just something that we were both like, yes, let's do this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm really glad that I could come on to this one going off of the first season. And, Alex and MC covered this. Alex Kane was on the show, and I really appreciated his background and understanding sort of more the Western mythology of everything. And it was really incredible to hear you guys talk about it and being like, oh my God, listening to it and oh my God, I saw this, or oh my God, I didn't see that, and getting excited. So needless to say, I love you, Alex, but I'm really excited to do this season.
And I'm hoping we can get him in for at least an episode to join us, but we'll see. So Once Upon a Time in the Outer Rim, this name, and I covered this last season, but I just want to make sure that everybody's aware what you're going to get from this show. This show is, Ty and I very much view it as a mythical and Western fusion. And what I mean by that is that it pulls in genre tropes from, the Western in Hollywood, the movie genre itself, but it adds on this layer of mythical symbolism, lenses, and genre, almost like enhanced meta meaning to it, that we see strongly throughout the first season. And we are glad to say season 2 is starting out mythically as well.
Oh yeah, easily, very, very mythical. And I love that the conversations today on Twitter, everybody was really excited, and that made me really happy to see that people who liked Mandalorian generally were very happy and very satisfied and looking forward to getting back on the Star Wars train, because I was too.
Yeah.
But yeah, it made me, to say about the mythical stuff and whatnot, it really did make me delve back into the myths. And not just I got out on my Star Wars books first, but then I also pulled out my Edith Hamilton mythology book, because it had me getting into that idea of, what is this saying that stands the test of time? What are the stories that it is evoking? What are the stories that it is peeking into the subconsciousness of all of humanity? What is it pulling out of that? And it was cool, because it was the first time in a very long time that Star Wars had me doing that. So
Star Wars had us doing research and thinking about things in a metatextual way. And that's always where I'm in my happy space. So This was Chapter 9, The Marshal, written by Jon Favreau, directed by Jon Favreau. To catch up and make sure that you catch all of our episodes on The Mandalorian and everything else that we cover, please make sure to like or subscribe on your podcast app of choice and or YouTube. And, now, into the spoiler land.
Spoilers! Yes. Yeah, this episode is obviously full of spoilers. We're going to talk about everything without holding anything back. So, short summary of the episode. This will be short and sweet, getting to the main points that we're going to cover later on. So at the beginning of the episode, we find Din Djarin and his ward in a new criminal underworld, buildings scoured with graffiti. searching for information that could lead them to other Mandalorians. After a short scuffle and a reminder that Beskar is priceless, Din receives information for his quest and sets off to Tatooine. On Tatooine, we revisit Peli Motto, who finds out that Mando likes droids now and points him into the direction of an old mining town. There, Din finds Cobb Vanth, who is wearing what looks to be Mandalorian armor. They forge a deal. If Din will help Cobb get rid of a crate dragon that is terrorizing the town, then Cobb will relinquish his armor. With the help of the town's villagers and the Tusken Raiders, they travel to confront the dragon, who lives in a so-called abandoned Sarlacc pit. Things don't go as planned, of course, and Din makes a last-ditch effort to take down the dragon by getting himself eaten along with a bantha packed with explosives. Using his sniper rifle, he ejects himself from the dragon's maw and ignites the explosives, successfully slaying the dragon. Din then retrieves his bounty, and we see an older man looking on from far off with Tusken weapons strapped to his back. Dun, dun, dun.
Yes. That is exactly what we saw.
And obviously, the internet is run amok with the speculations and theories of what this may be.
So, what did you think of our initial episode of season 2?
Oh, I absolutely loved it. I was very much enthralled with it from the very beginning. From the moment I saw the graffiti on the walls, you know, with the like pictures of droids and stuff. Like there was like a little, like what looked like to be a golden C-3PO in there. And then there was like a stormtrooper, and there was a bunch of really cool things. And from that moment on, I was like, okay, cool. We're going into this. This is the next chapter. This is the next season. And it felt new. It felt different. And then throughout, it was like, yeah, we're going back to old places, but it still felt new.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So that was cool.
Okay. So I tried to get it to load, like the crazy people in the middle of the night, right? I couldn't get it to load on my iPad for some reason, and I was really tired. This week has been rough. But so I woke up in the morning and I watched it, and my husband, so I watched it with like my noise canceling headphones on my iPad. He watched me watch it. And I was like teary, like I didn't cry, like just I was super misty the whole time because it felt so good to be in a Star Wars that did some things that are super Star Wars. So one of the things that I noticed right off the bat was how much time they spent on establishing shots.
Yes.
They spent time letting you know where you are and what kind of environment you are in. Even if it was just, you know, Mando talking to the sand people in the middle of the Tatooine desert, they spent time, nothing happens. They just see them around a campfire. Mm-hmm. He's sitting down and he's talking to them. You know, you scan past and you see the two sons. You see, you know, the bantha train like walk up to the cave. Like it allows you to feel the worlds that you go to. The city itself, like he walks through that city, you see the skyline, you see the graffiti on the wall, you know, you walk literally up to the building. It felt so Star Wars because of the establishing shots. Mm-hmm. You know, I felt like home again.
Yeah.
And one of the things that really kind of made me think, okay, what are they trying to do right off the bat, was that this didn't feel like a season 2 premiere. It was long, right? But it didn't like structurally function like you would think, oh, we see the big bad guy for the season, or we were introduced to kind of the meta plot. No. It jumps us right into the action, and he's right at his journey already. And what he faces throughout the journey, we know, or throughout this first episode, we know are the things that he needs to resolve by the end of this season. Mm-hmm. They set up all of the questions.
Yeah. Well, and they also, this was called Chapter 9. It was not marketed as season 2. It was Chapter 9. What's really funny is that I think last time when we talked about Mando on What the Force, I said, I pointed out the naming style of the episodes and how the first episode was called, I think the first episode was called The Mandalorian. And hold on, let me make sure.
And then it was the child.
Yes. So the first episode is called the Mandalorian, and then it's the child, the sin, and then one word sanctuary, and then the gunslinger, the prisoner, the reckoning, and then one word redemption. And I really wondered if they're going to continue on the same naming style. And it looks like they might.
Yeah, very, very short names. And again, this is more like that. And one of the reasons why I love Once Upon a Time in the Outer Rim, it's like it's a combination of both fairy tale, like mythically speaking, and Western.
Yeah.
And having these be chapters feels very fairy tale. And also it has this kind of feeling of old-timey story. So, we know right off the bat, he's on a quest.
A quest.
He's on a quest. He is questing. He explains that to Peli, but he's like, I'm trying to find Mandalorians, just straight up telling everybody. Everybody knows what his deal is. The kid goes everywhere with him now.
He says, I've been quested. To bring this one back to his kind. I have been quested. That's crazy. That is crazy to me. I mean, it sounds totally normal coming from Din Djarin's mouth because he's that kind of character. But I thought about that for a second. I'm like, Star Wars people don't say that. That's bizarre.
Yeah, the like language that people in this galaxy, Mandalorians, Quill, and some of the people that were on that one planet, they speak in almost this lyrical way, right? Like it's almost like fascinating to listen to. And being quested is not voluntary.
No.
I use this term at work sometimes when my boss or somebody higher up the food chain tells me to do something. I have been voluntold.
Oh, that's funny.
Right? So it's like I've been voluntold to go and do this, right? Whereas questing, it's active. It's you as the hero going on this journey because you must. He's quested. He is told. He is voluntold to go and do this with his will or against his will. His honor means that he must obey. And he blames the armorer too in the episode.
Does he?
Yeah, when he explains what he's doing to Peli.
I thought he just said I've been quested
by the armorer.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, he has been quested by the armorer, but yeah, he is saying. And that's another thing about this is that we'll get into the mythic stuff is important that, like you said, he's kind of sort of putting it on her. Like she sent me on this quest. Think about that. Like this is like if the armorer is one of our only goddess figures of the show so far. She's one of the only feminine figures of the show so far. And she sent him on this quest.
Yeah.
And he is totally understanding of that. He is totally putting that on her. You sent me on this quest. What happens when he doesn't find what he's looking for? And he goes back to her and he tells her that he failed. If that happens, which I will like scream in glee, but yeah.
Well, I think it's an important thing to point out because I didn't think we were going to go in this direction, but I love it. So I think it's an important thing to point out because it's also him denying his true path. And one of the things that is really, really important is you must be on your own journey. If you are on somebody else's path, it's somebody else's journey.
Yes.
And you're not going to find what you're looking for. So he has to, through the course of this season especially, figure out exactly what it is that he needs to do. And it's going to come out in the confrontations he's going to have with the foes, with the meeting of allies. It's going to come out.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So initial thoughts and feelings of like kind of the main points, and we'll get into the mythic stuff. We'll get into the genre stuff after we kind of hit some of these other main points. You had a lot of these, so I'll let you.
Oh yeah. So
start.
The quest was one of the main things. Also, unintentionally, he doesn't see it, but the gathering of community is something that he is taking on and is responsible for because of the search for others like him. He's like, I can use the community, i.e. the different havens of Mandalorians, to try and find the child's people. That's his logic. But really what it's going to be is he needs to try and find the Mandalorians and help them.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's written all over this show. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing that's really, really important is that he doesn't understand his place in the child's life. And that's clearly textually expressed by both our Abyssin Cyclops type friend who is played by John Leguizamo, Gor Kresh, in the sort of Star Wars Gamorrean MMA fight. He's like, you brought a kid here, dude. But then also, Cobb also questions the Mandalorian to say, you're going to kill me in front of your child? I thought you were different because you have a child with you. Yeah,
I thought, so this is so interesting. And I'm glad you brought this up because I thought that line that the Cyclops guy, the Gor Koresh guy, brought up in the very beginning was really odd and really misplaced. And anytime anything in The Mandalorian makes me feel uncomfortable, I look at it like 5
times.
Something
else. They're saying something else.
They're saying something else. There's something else going on here. Because if it feels out of place, that means that it's tickling my subconsciousness and telling me, you know what this is. What is it trying to tell you? And that's exactly what it was. It's because in the first season, no one would have said that. It's not what the first season was not about that. The first season was about him accepting his role as a father. Well,
and this is about understanding his role as a father, because everyone is like, okay, you're not going to be separated from the child. You're now a clan of 2. You're on your everybody knows, dude, that you travel with the kid and he goes everywhere you go. We get it. But have you fed him recently? Like, he's literally we talked about this before we started recording, but in that moment, he has to protect himself from the bad guys and from the Mandalorians.
Yeah.
Because Din is so careless. Mm-hmm. He doesn't understand his role and his responsibility, and he doesn't accept it. It's like this has been thrust upon him, and he hasn't accepted it yet and understood it. And I think that is just they showed it brilliantly throughout the episode without telling us straight up. They kind of told us because it's literally the characters on the screen telling us, but it's not like he's like, I don't understand my role. He's like a dumb dad who's like, I don't know how to change a diaper. I was that parent too, by the way. I can tell you stories. I was like, new baby, like, I feel like I skipped this part and all of the ability to change a diaper like went out of my head. But you know what I'm saying? Like, he hasn't understood what his responsibilities are, and this is a growing period for him.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
There's a few kind of key moments and like I loved so much about this episode, but like the homage to especially the prequels, especially The Phantom Menace, with several moments of like George like love for childlike wonder. They pulled out a lot of things to make it feel more George-like, but in a smarter way. Like the the speeder bikes again are like motorcycles or like hot racers, like, which feels very George. One Cobb's is specifically made out of Anakin's pod racer engine. It is the exact engine. It's just painted red.
Oh, really?
Yes, and it's missing one of the fins. So that is Anakin's like pod engine. Just one of them. Just one of them. And I mean, like, if you were to speak about it from a meta perspective, it's because, you know, Dave is without George, and, you know.
I love that.
You know, the droid love coming out from Din after understanding the importance of droids in the galaxy, and him being respectful of droids, including the pit droids, who are ridiculous the way that George wanted them to be. And then
there was actually something else there, a little bit in the detail about how the mechanic refers to the
child.
The droid that has the map.
R5 is the droid that wasn't sold to Luke.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's so funny. I cannot believe how many like Easter eggs were in this that didn't bother me at all.
I'm sure that there's way more. Like, people probably caught way more than this, but these were the things that I was like, yes, these are the reasons I like them.
That's so funny, because she does harp on a couple of moments. Oh, it's so hard to get good help these days.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really interesting because within the first season, I would not have like, you know, thought that she was like that. Like, I would not have thought that she would refer to droids like that. But then given the contrast now Din Djarin, you know, she had the line, "Oh, so he likes droids now." You know, she was like, "Oh, you like droids now, I guess." She made this big sarcastic show of it, and then she like calls over her like slave droid, and she's like, "Oh, it's so hard to get good help these days."
Yeah,
it's like, it's a reminder. It's a contrast. It's showing us like, you know, Din Djarin is not treating droids in that way. He actually always referred to them as evil things, which meant that he always believed that they had some kind of like subconscious, some kind of being. And most people treat them as if they're not beings at all.
Yeah, they're just appliances.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's very, very interesting. That was a new contrast that I did not see coming. And again, it's that thing where if it makes you feel uncomfortable, if it makes you're like, what does this mean? Yeah.
Think about it. Yeah.
Think about it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I also, I mean, generally speaking, I love the Krayt Dragon, and like, there's a lot of mythology in universe. This is straight up in universe about dragons. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it's explored a little bit in Myth and Fables. That was a book that came out last year that explored kind of myths and fables in Star Wars. But the Krayt Dragon itself is like an ancestor or related to the mythological dragons that live in the Tatooine Suns.
Oh, yeah. And I have like a whole thing I want to get into that with when we delve into the myth part of it, and we will talk about that more. But yeah, everyone was delving into Krayt Dragons today on Twitter. It made me so happy because I remember researching for an episode we did on mining, and
there's mining in this.
Oh yeah, there's mining in this. So good. I was so happy it came back. I wrote in my notes, I'm like, it's back. Like, I was so happy. But, you know, that kind of stuff.
Tatooine was destroyed by mining, so that's an important thing to point out.
A very important thing. An old mining town. Oh, my God. Yeah. Krayt Dragons are so fascinating. It's another one of those things that is it's basically a thing that, because it's been so iterative, it's been used over and over again to a certain extent. Mm-hmm. And yet this is the first instance we've seen it in like a live iteration. It got people like, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we've seen their skeletons, right? They're almost mythical in and of themselves. And yeah, it got people super excited, right?
Oh yeah, we were all delving into like, what does it mean in Legends? How is it different from canon? What are they drawing from? Like, what is the point here? What's going on? Why did it look like this? Why didn't it have legs? Did it have legs? In the recent canon, in Jedi Temple Run, I forget if that's what that's called, but yeah, the show with the kids and the competition setting, there was a story, and it was the story of the clay, the red clay. It was like one of the first episodes.
Yeah.
And one of the creatures that they molded was a crate dragon. And then like the toy maker sold it in his toy store, but it had 10 legs. So it's like one of those things where the canon just kind of has to make it work as it goes.
Yeah.
And so the canon likes to say, okay, well, there's a greater crate dragon, and then there's like a smaller crate dragon, and they have differences, and the one that Luke fought in this one canon piece is different from the one that we saw the skeleton of, or it's different from the one that was in the Myths and Legends book that the Jedi, some random Jedi fought, which I have like my own ideas about, but we'll talk about it later. But it's just it's so funny. And I love that about the canon. I love that it doesn't have to be exact. It doesn't have to be perfect.
What I love is that this is a fairy tale a long time ago. And so it doesn't need, like, to reiterate what you're saying is, it's actually better if it's not as clear and maybe there's multiple interpretations. It makes it more fairy tale or more mythical if there's multiple versions of the same truth.
Exactly. It does. It's definitely more like that. I agree.
and then kind of the last thing that was kind of on my list is just the end reveal. I mean, there's so much about this, and primarily most of the things I love are in the mythic area and in kind of the metatextual area, but that we're going to get into. But just the reveal of Temuera Morrison at the end, I was like, it's just so nice to have him back in the Star Wars universe. He was most recently, I think, in the Aquaman movie. He played a role, Aquaman's dad. Human dad, but I think it's just so nice to have him back in the Star Wars universe. And for those that don't know, he played Jango Fett in Attack of the Clones, and he played every single clone trooper in the prequels.
That is so cool.
Yeah. And they did computer animation, so he was like, not always on screen or in the armor, etc. But he did play Jango Fett in Attack of the Clones and had that major role. And so if you think about it, like what this means, that is probably Boba Fett at the end. I have several reasons for that. And primarily one of them is it's been 40 years since little kid Boba, 10-year-old Temuera Morrison, and looks about 50. And that's probably it.
So this is so cool. So Temuera Morrison is from New Zealand, right? And you know what island is north of New Zealand is Fiji. It's like, pretty close, Oceania, whatnot. And the weapon that Tusken Raiders use was fashioned off a club called a Tatokia, which is a battle hammer from Fiji.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And then at the end of like the show, he's got one of these things like fastened to his back
with the sand people and their like rifle, the Tusken Raider rifle.
Yeah, it's a Tusken Raider rifle, but the Tusken Raiders also use this like club thing. Yeah, it's really cool because it like calls back to like the beginning of what Star Wars was all about, which was about establishing like the old and the new together, and like this constant play of like it's sci-fi, but it's also like remnants of the past. So they found this cool weapon from Fiji, and they were like, oh, this is cool. Like, let's have these people who like live in the desert hold it, because that doesn't make any sense. And now we have like an actor who's from New Zealand who's carrying it.
That's cool.
It's really cool. It's really cool. But yeah, sorry, I just had to throw that in there.
With all of the foreshadowing, with showing Boba Fett's armor, with the age that he is presented in the show, it's definitely Boba Fett. I don't think that there's any other clone that could look like him. We know that the other clones that are alive by the end of Return of the Jedi look much older, gray hair, all of those things. And Temuera Morrison, as presented on screen, looks about the age of Boba Fett.
Oh yeah, it looks very, very similar. Mm-hmm. The age, the look, the everything is like very much him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think there could be any doubts.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, let's move on to genre. And I think with the directly referring to it as quested, we can now say it's straight up a Knight's Quest.
Oh, for sure.
So we can say it's like he's on a quest, he's on a journey, right? And there's going to be lots and lots of parallels to those sorts of things that we would find. And so there's going to be, I would say they're probably going to double down on some of the Campbellinian things that we have seen in season 1. We're going to see even more of that. And because of how mythic these things tend to be, we're going to save a lot of that for our mythical section. Did you have anything to say on Camelot, knights, and quests?
I think we said a lot in like the for the first season, because there was a lot more direct symbols with the armor and with the signet and all that kind of stuff, getting the armor, earning the armor, all of that. But yeah, that's I like your notes for the Western stuff. So I'm excited to hear about more of that.
Yeah, I do want to say, like, genre wise, this is playing into broad strokes Western. I think that we might still see some direct parallels to some Westerns that have existed in the past, but it's almost a subversion of what we have seen in, say, like The Searchers, for an example. Jon Favreau's, like, one of his favorite directors is John Ford, and not too long ago, you know, within this last year, I did an episode on The Searchers as a influence to Star Wars. Specifically, like, George Lucas loved The Searchers. It's a very, very important movie to many key directors in Hollywood. As an example, Martin Scorsese watches it every single time before he starts to work on a movie. Like, Steven Spielberg loves it. Jon Favreau loves John Ford. And The Searchers influences these directors and George Lucas in how they think about movies. A lot of the times it's from emotionality or from, establishing shots. The Searchers was really, really good for that. There's a lot to do with conflict internally versus externally, and the sort of things that burn away and eat away at your soul. It's a really, really fascinating movie. It is certainly of a different time period in Hollywood and has some very controversial things about it, especially when viewing it from a today's lens. So I do want to give that caveat and warning. But in general, Westerns bring out certain aspects of like how we look at our society. They're very nostalgic, and they play on nostalgia as myth. And we see that come forward in The Mandalorian a lot, right? We count these things as Easter eggs, right? These referential things that we see on screen, but it's almost like mythical, like our childhood coming back and being now in a new production of The it really puts at the forefront sort of masculine ideals of being rugged and being an individual, being individualistic. You're out there on your own trying to save the day. We've talked about the American monomyth on the show before, but it is something that is, you know, a lot of self-sacrifice for the community, and it's almost like, if you were to view it, is like romanticizing your death to save others.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a lot of that in Westerns. Also, it's, you know, clinging to a previous time and place in an idealistic way. Like, things were better in the West, or, you know, things were more honorable in the West. And then also kind of portraying the mix of both the wildness of nature versus the industrialization that is coming to a town. And we literally see that play out in the show, this episode. We see the Sand People with their methods versus the miners and the town folk with their methods.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of that kind of like duality and binary kind of playing out, which it's a duality that becomes a binary, kind of how it's played out in here, which I really love. But I also love that idea of reminding people that the American mythos, the American monomyth, is something that is because there was a truth to it at some point. And the truth was that there was this idea of like hearkening back to nature, you know, conquering this wild land, but also, you know, setting out on the quest to conquer it and then finding a way to live amongst it and live with that wildness. As a lot of those Westerns will show us that is the end of that story. It is finding a truth and learning to be with something as opposed to fighting against it, which is what the initial quest was. So I wanted to say, because it is like the American monomyth does not work now because it does not reflect the truth of now, right? We have grown beyond it. We have grown past it. And yet a lot of our stories still are trying to evoke that, but it is not true anymore. We have conquered the land. The land has been won, and we're conquering other lands. Like, people have understood the international implications of like America and Western culture. So they're not willing to buy that myth anymore. So that's why it's like, it's still important as a myth. It's still important to talk about it. It's still important to analyze it. And it has a place in story.
But it might not be fully satisfying when you leave the town. Where are you going when you leave the town, hero? Right? And that's what we discover, is that what we see play out is the, you know, high level understanding of what Armando is going to go through. He needs to understand that he cannot be in it just for himself like the miners, or just for themselves like the Sand People. He has to work together with that other part of himself, the child, to find a new way of existing, right?
Yeah.
And we see that play out with how he views the world, and he's going to learn from the lessons of the trials that he undergoes. That's part of a hero's journey, right? He goes through these trials. He sometimes fails. He sometimes succeeds. He sometimes finds a middle path, and he found a middle path by volunteering the village, just like he was voluntold to be the child's keeper.
Like that. I like that. Yeah, I thought about a little bit that too, about when he said, I volunteered your village. It's like, wow. So you really learned a lesson from that past episode with what's her name? with the romantic interests and the
Omura?
blue. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like, he really learned an interesting lesson there. He was like, you know what? I'm just going to volunteer them, because she basically volunteered her people. Yeah. You know, it's a really interesting thing there. But yeah.
This is really important because, like, Jon Favreau has been very upfront with how he loves Westerns. And, you know, specifically, there's a couple of really cool articles on him directing Cowboys and Aliens and how much, like, Western influence he was able to bring into that, right? The Western genre itself. But what's happening in this show is not strictly straight Western. It is from an episodic nature. The hero rides into town literally on a speeder, interacts with the environment, finds the bad thing, right? Goes and solves the bad thing problem, and then leaves. That is the Western, the individual episode. But from a meta and like cross continuation of the story, he is on a journey. He learns. We see in this episode that he has learned lessons from the previous season and has started to implement those in his life, like how he treats droids, how he's taken on a more mentorship role and leader role within the communities that he's in. He cares about others. He doesn't want to kill people if he doesn't have to, but he's willing to. Mm-hmm. And he also learned a lot from Quill and starts to kind of sound like him, especially when talking about the dragon. There's a few moments in this I'm like, am I listening to Quill or am I listening to Din Djarin? Mm-hmm. Because of how he sounds. And it's because he has learned lessons from his mentor, which was Quill. Mm-hmm. It's wonderful because it is the combination of kind of that storytelling genre in the episodic form, but it's got the continuation to it.
Yeah. Quill's death was not in vain.
Yeah. And if you watch the gallery episode, Rick Famuyiwa, I don't think he still understands why Quill died. Aww. I think he was sad because he directed that episode, right? And he's like, oh no, it was Deborah Chow. Deborah Chow that directed that episode? Yeah, it was Deborah Chow.
It was Deborah Chow, yeah.
Deborah Chow directed that episode, but Rick Famuyiwa was like, but you still killed Quill and you still killed IG-11. Like, you still killed these people. And he's like, death is important.
Yeah.
You know, not everybody can live. And yeah, that's true. I just think that it you know, the deaths have to mean something, right? And that's really important.
Yeah. And this is the meaning. This is the meaning continued beyond that death. That's where it really matters.
And again, there's a few kind of similarities to maybe the Magnificent Seven, you know, Saving the Village. There's a few kind of similarities kind of with broad strokes Western genre, right? So we have, you know, the one horse town. Suddenly the hero rides in and suddenly it has two horses, you know, literally, like it was like it was like a one street town. There wasn't like streets. It was one street. The barkeep who was a Weequay barkeep, and the Weequay is the same as Hondo Ohnaka, if you're familiar with Hondo from Rebels or from Clone Wars or even from Galaxy's Edge. Same kind of species as Hondo. And, you know, we have the barkeep like, what do you need, customer? And, you know, pours the drinks. And, you know, we have Timothy Olyphant, who is most famously from Deadwood as the sheriff of Deadwood. And it's like they plucked him out of Deadwood. He walks the same, like it. I think Jon Favreau was like, I imagine Timothy Olyphant from Deadwood in this role, and he just went and got him, and he is fantastic as a Western character, and the Marshal himself is a really fascinating character because a Marshal is not just like the modern connotation associated with the courts, you know, in the U.S., where a U.S. Marshal is somebody who goes after does prisoner transfers or chases people who have like skipped out etc., or, traces down prisoners. A marshal is sometimes a self-elected leader of a small community. And going back even further than that from a medieval perspective, a marshal is often associated with, kind of synonymous with mayor, a leader of a community. And there's a militaristic connotation to it, because sometimes a field marshal would be synonymous with being a general. And I'm wondering if we're going to get any of that if he comes back at a future date.
He could go up the ranks a little bit more, but only because there were no other ranks. Yeah, the marshal, it looked like there was only a marshal and nothing else. So he could become a king. He could become anything.
Well, I just think he might end up being somebody who helps Din gather allies later on in the season. But I do want to say in some ways it subverts your expectations of a typical Western, because of how Din, and it's almost like Din is transforming the typical Western ideas, like how you would treat the Sand People. He speaks the language, he integrates, he knows the society, he understands the Sand People significantly. Yeah. And that's a very big shift from, say, if you were to watch The Searchers. I think it's almost like there's been a shift in the mentality to say, oh yeah, that's how it used to be, but this is the new myth. This is the new Western. This is going to be different this time. It's almost like repairing the story.
Yeah.
The
fact that, because we got a glimpse of it in the last season, that he talked to them, he interacted with them, he could speak their language, he didn't treat them like they were inhuman, he treated them like they were very much human. And that was just a tiny this could be, we could get more out of this. It was a hint of what was to come. So that was really nice.
Absolutely. So are you ready to deep dive into the mythology?
Yes, please.
All right. Where do you want to start?
Okay. So the where we left off at the end of the first season was that Mando, Din Djarin, had basically experienced an ego death, right?
What is an ego death?
So an ego death is the experience of spiritual self-annihilation. It is a spiritual and psychological, if you want to go from a more scientific point of view, it's a psychological death, a loss of the self. And when you are able to consciously go through pain and suffering as an individual, and you're able to consciously process that pain, not physical necessarily, it can be physical, but it doesn't have to be. Once you are able to go through that psychological trauma consciously, truthfully, process it, that means you can revisit it too if it happens that you later process it. Once you're able to go through that, you experience a separation from yourself, because you are not the same person now that you were when you began. And you have to separate in order to continue on, in order to kind of integrate those two parts of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So
the big moment was when he took his helmet off, or when his helmet was taken off of him. He was healed by the droid. And then, there was a rebirth moment for him.
Yes, he was literally the phoenix that was born again from the ashes.
Yeah.
That was all symbolized in the jetpack and whatnot. And that began, when he kind of sort of was willingly wanting to die at that moment.
Yeah.
So
and Fate was like, no.
IG was like, no, like, I'm joking with you. You're going to be fine. I think it was an ego death of sorts. Now, the funny thing about ego death is that you can experience it over and over and over and over again. Like, it's not one thing. Doesn't happen just one time. It depends on the person. It depends on the things that you need to learn, the things that you want, like what you want out of life, what you need. If you need something for someone else, like, you might experience that over and over again. So I pulled some quotes that I'll share throughout from The Hero with a Thousand Faces and Creative Mythology and Primitive Mythology and some others from Joseph Campbell. And one of the ones I wanted to share at the beginning of this topic was about the crossing of the threshold and about, sort of the land of trials. And he says, the original departure into the land of trials represented only the beginning of the long and really perilous path of initiatory conquests and moments of illumination. Dragons have now to be slain, and the surprising barriers passed again, and again. And I just thought that was a really beautiful way to say, like, you're going to keep going through this over and over again. Because obviously he went through this a lot in the first season. And I've seen people say that certain episodes are side quests. And I've seen people say that this episode, chapter 9, was a side quest. And I'm like,
or a filler episode.
Or a filler. Yeah. And it's like, your entire life is a life of side quest.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, you are not going throughout your entire life looking for ways to die, because that is essentially what it is. Like, and I'll get into that a little bit, because there's a lot of death and like annihilation imagery in this episode.
Yep. Death and rebirth is, going in and out of a dragon.
Yeah.
Going into the belly of the beast. Right. He not only fights the dragon, but he goes into the belly of the beast, which is like just reminding us where we are in our journey. We're going in again. We're going into the underworld, into the unknown. That's what it's reminding us of.
And you have to keep going back. Like, it's like the freaking Hades game that we're all playing right now.
Yeah. Like, you and I are both playing Hades, and it's like, when I told you, you were like, I defeated Megaran. I'm like, this time.
And I was like, no, I thought I only had to do it once.
I died. I was like, I was so happy when I killed her the first time. First time I got to her, I killed her. And I was like, yeah, I'm now in the next level. And then you die and you're like, oh no. And you have to go back. And yeah, it might be a little bit shorter this time. You've learned a few lessons. You've gained some power. But you still have to go through the trials that you have to go through. And sometimes you have to relearn lessons. Like, I think that that's part of it, is like, he has, yes, accepted that he is with the child and that this is his responsibility, but has he owned that deep within his soul? No. And so this is reminding us that he still has growth that he needs to go on, and he is not where he needs to be.
Yeah.
Just yet.
Yeah, exactly. So there's some things that I think you wanted to say about the Cyclops, which I found it so funny you had called them that.
The Cyclops?
Just that he was a Cyclops, which was really funny.
Yeah, and so like the in-universe race is an Abyssin, right? So he's like, originally an Abyssin was in the cantina scene of A New Hope. They've showed up, in and out of canon. But from a mythic perspective, he's a Cyclops. And that's important because Cyclopses are very, very smart from a mythic perspective. And they're tricksters. And there's like this gambling that tries to happen. Like, he almost tries to trick Din into taking a bad deal, right? Mm-hmm. And this reminds me a lot of Odysseus. And the journey, the Odyssey, that Odysseus is on, and when him and his crew run into the Cyclops, there's almost like this trickster type thing, and so he has to blind the Cyclops to be able to leave with his crew, and tricks them in the guise of sheep's clothing, basically.
Yeah.
He is able to trick the Cyclops by saying, hey, I won't be the one to kill you, right? He outwits the Cyclops, and that's really, really cool and important. And now I'm like, there might be more of this Odyssey kind of ongoing journey trials. We see him in the Mandalorian trailer on a boat, and I'm wondering if he's going to run into maybe even like a Cersei type island.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of things I've been thinking about that with the Campbellian point of view of it, which was his night. He could be going on his Night Sea journey, which is a whole, different
what is that?
thing. And
in brief, too long didn't read.
In brief, it's kind of like that. It's that moment in time where everything is standing very still for the hero, and they delve into something that's like a more of a memory, a treasure, and I don't want to get too much into it.
I always thought it was like you end up diving into your subconscious because water is a gateway to the subconscious.
Yes, but like all of those journeys are like that. So, but water is very specific in that it is holding something. It's not just like the belly of the whale. Like water itself in the sea is symbolic of endless possibilities and memory, right? Memory of being
that's what I meant. Like
womb.
it's in like you go back to the earliest form of yourself when you're on the water.
Exactly. So there's like this idea of that there. Yeah, that I hope that I can't wait to delve into that. And I'm saving that for that episode because I'm hoping that's what we're going to get.
We're not going to go too deep into that parallel, but it's interesting that it starts with a Cyclops. I think that's super interesting. And then he goes straight up and goes and fights a dragon. Like,
oh yeah.
Like that's telling us that he is straight back into the journey and is back into the unknown. He has gone through the gate already for this phase of his journey, and he's on his way to experiencing another transformation.
Oh yeah, for sure. He has to be. I mean, like if they're going to start an episode, you're going to start a season like that. I mean, come on. So there's another parallel in myth that I really, really, really like, which is Jason and the Golden Fleece, Jason the Argonauts kind of story, but very specifically like what the Golden Fleece is and what it means and whatnot. And I kind of fixated on this for a while today, and I was like, maybe it's not. And the more I thought about it, I was like, well, it kind of is, depending on the interpretation you're looking at, because in the Edith Hamilton version of like Jason and the Golden Fleece, it's very focused on the literature version of the story, which is that Jason goes to the king and he says, hey, like you have the Golden Fleece. I want it. It's like in your backyard, basically. And the king says, like, okay, you can have it. You have to do this. You have to do that. So Jason takes care of the bulls that are guarding the Golden Fleece. But then he goes back to the king. The king says, like, you betrayed me. You can't have it now. And then Medea, she goes to Jason. She's like, no, we'll get it together. I will lull the dragon to sleep and you can get the fleece. And they do that and they escape. And then basically the whole story is about power in the literature version. But then as time went on and as that story got shared, like iteratively and whatnot, urn painters start drawing the story onto the urns, but they're showing more of a physical nature of the story, which funny enough involves Jason being eaten by the dragon and being regurgitated by the dragon
and winning the golden fleece.
And winning the golden fleece. And the golden fleece is like in the background of the painting on the pillar, like hanging there. And then the king is always present in the urn painting as well. And it's so interesting because the story is about power, it always starts with Jason going to the king saying, hey, you have the golden fleece. I need it. And then the king's like, oh, well, it's guarded by this dragon. You have to go get it. Under my rules, you have to go get it if I allow you to go get it. And what happens in this story is that
literally like
the marshal's like, yeah, you can have the Mandalorian armor, but only if you like go under like my rules. You have to defeat this thing to get it. So it's very much like and then this happens a lot.
And he gets unexpected help, right, from the Sand People.
Unexpected help, which is like kind of Medea saying, hey, we know everything about Medea, lulls the serpent / dragon to sleep with her song. And the Sand People are like, hey, we know the science of this creature. We know how to control it.
We've been tracking its feeding. It's hunger cycles. It's like, whoa.
Exactly. And the cool thing is, I think the imagery struck me when Din actually gets the Mandalorian armor, or, the Boba's armor, which is obvious now. But when he gets that armor from Cobb, the way that he takes it and the way that he stacks it on his speeder, it is kind of like this boon, like this reward. It's his, and next to this big chunk of meat from the dragon, it is so, it's partially video gamey and partially mythic.
Yeah.
I can't even explain it. It's something I've never seen in a show before.
I know. It stacked it exactly like kind of standing up and empty. And what it reminded me of was almost like there's a few kind of interspersed legends about Lancelot's armor and the Black Knight armor, and how these armors are almost self-possessed separately of the hero themselves and almost have a magical or mythical quality to themselves. And it reminded me of that this armor has a specific mythical nature about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like that.
That's kind of what I don't know if that's the direct parallel that they're doing yet, but the way that you describe it, it is like a boon. It is a boon.
Yeah.
And we know in canon that in the future, a different person is wearing Boba Fett's armor. So whether they're going to stick with that or not, it will be really interesting to find out.
Wait, it wasn't just Cobb?
No.
Who else wears it?
It's a bounty hunter in a separate comic.
Oh, okay.
That's seen wearing it.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. So I don't know if it comes back. I mean, it was just after we have the timeline of when Cobb got the armor. So I don't know if this kind of is messing with that timeline or not, or if it integrates. I'm not 100% sure, but nor do I care, because multiple truths can be true at the same time. That bounty hunter could be wearing Boba Fett E armor, and Cobb could also have Boba Fett E armor.
Interesting. Yeah, because like the whole thing right now is that if it is Boba Fett's armor that Cobb was wearing in this particular episode, then it's actually not Beskar.
Yeah.
It's like Durasteel or whatever, because Mando didn't have...
Not all Mandalorians have Beskar armor.
Beskar.
Because Mando himself started out with just like Durasteel.
Yeah, so that initial thing that was established at the beginning of the episode, that's Beskar, I want that. It's telling us there's a difference between people wanting Beskar and then the Mandos wanting their people's armor. That's very different. Mando gave a meaning to that armor because he is Mandalorian, because of the creed, right? Not because it's actually worth anything.
it has a meaning from in some ways. Like, I'm thinking about how, we don't like to see the bones of our ancestors misplaced and put in a different place. Like, you don't dig up somebody's bones and move them to this happens all the time to especially our indigenous population, but anybody would be upset if a massive grave or a grave site was moved to make way for like a highway or freeway. It's like we don't like to see this thing that represented a person. The armor represents a person in the Mandalorian tradition, right? And we don't want to see that thing being, in the wrong hands or in the wrong location. And it's really interesting that Gor, that was his name, Gor Koresh, the Abyssin in the fight ring, referred to the armor as a shell.
Yeah.
Right? That was really interesting. Like, the Beskar is like this very delicious shell, and he like pops out the middle and he gets the Beskar, and it's worth a lot of money, like very greedily, right? But you're right. What Boba Fett's armor means is something different, not just to us as the audience who understands who that person was, from a character perspective, but to Din, it means something traditionally, and that's important.
Yeah, no, and we'll learn that more as he gets to know who he is, like who is Boba, and all this armor that he is it's almost like a worship in a way of that armor because of the creed. And then once he finds out who Boba really is, like, is that going to be an enemy? Like, I think so, but yeah, we'll see.
I don't know. When you go inside of the Leviathan, you go inside of the whale, you go inside of the Sarlacc, and you survive, you are reborn. Is he the same person?
But I don't think that, I still, even if Boba is not the same person, the fact that he left the Mandalorian, the fact that he never associated with the Mandalorian creed, and yet he wore the armor, I think Din's going to be very upset about that.
Yeah, we'll find out more. I'm excited for the conflict.
I'm so excited. So excited. I think it'd be great. But yeah, let's talk about the dragon. Let's talk about the dragon.
I think because it's a dragon, everyone was like, oh, they're going mythic. And it wasn't even me that had to say that. People were like, I logged on to Twitter and people were like, has Marie Claire seen this episode yet? And I'm like, no, I was tired. Like, I couldn't. But, as of the morning, I totally did. And I knew as soon as a dragon's involved, it means something.
Yeah.
And we've already started to go into that, but they use other terms for this dragon. It's bigger than we imagined. It's a Leviathan. It literally behaves kind of like a Moby Dick or a whale in some ways. Like it goes through the sand and it swallows up people, It is a mythological creature, and it replaces mythological creatures of all sorts of kinds. It's telling you that this myth is a big one.
Yeah, it's a big one. It's so funny when they first said the Krayt Dragon, I thought they have said the Great Dragon, because like, who wouldn't think that if you didn't know Star Wars lore? I mean, come on. I was like, oh, the Great Dragon. That's so mythic. Oh my God. And then I looked it up and I was like, oh no, they mean the Krayt Dragon. Because obviously throughout the day, things were being populated onto Wikipedia, and people were updating the Krayt Dragon page. And so I was like, this is so freaking fascinating, because from the beginning of this idea of this dragon, somebody named it Krayt.
Yeah.
Which sounds like great.
Yeah.
It wasn't very imaginative. It was very straight to the point, and it was always supposed to be very mythical.
And it is this thing that has been scary to the populace of Tatooine since A New Hope, because the sound that Obi-Wan makes to scare off the sound people is the wail, the cry of a krayt dragon.
Really?
Yes. Yeah.
That's where that comes from.
Yes.
Oh my God. Okay. A bunch of everything's just clicked in my head. Okay.
And we see the skeleton,
yeah,
in some of the new shots, especially the extended editions.
Yeah. That one popped up for me. They most recently did it in Battlefront 2. It was in there, but it was like a very similar skeleton. And then, but what's really crazy is most recently it popped up in Myths and Legends, and that has really thrown me for a loop, and I have been very fixated on that version of it for a very long time. But I'll get into that in a little bit. I did want to say some basic things about dragons.
Sure.
So dragons are threshold guardians in like Campbellian terms. They always guard the thresholds. They are, I would say that dragons are benevolent creatures. They are not there to be like literal dragons are not there to be villains. They're not there to impede the hero from getting what they need. They're actually just there to guard. And I know it sounds crazy, but what I mean by that is that they always inadvertently give the hero something that they do not have.
Yes.
So the dragon is there as a door. They're a threshold guardian, and all the hero has to do is get over their own stuff so they can get what the dragon is guarding. It's not as hard as defeating a villain, basically. Yeah. So and that's what I mentioned earlier, there can be many dragons in a hero's quest. They can be figurative, they can be literal, they can be very, very symbolic, like the dragon that we saw in the prisoner episode of the first season with just the guy with the horns.
Yeah.
That was a dragon that Din defeated. And they can represent things like the super ego. They can represent repressed id. They can represent, I really like the idea that they could represent a false love, when a dragon you can't see that it's a dragon until it spreads its wings, or it actually
transformed into something different and then turns into the scary dragon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so defeating that dragon is like overcoming a lie, overcoming something that was shown to you that wasn't real. It was a false love of some sort in many versions.
So what did this dragon psychologically represent to Din?
So this particular dragon, I think that this one's pretty general.
Yeah.
Because I think that but I think that the biggest tell for this dragon is like the swallowing eating portion of it.
I think this dragon was there to remind Din that some problems are bigger than you alone can deal with.
I mean, maybe. I don't know about that. Actually, I don't know about that. Because I
don't know.
I think this was Din overcoming life and death. I think this was proof that he went through his transformational ego death
previously.
Yeah.
I kind of, okay. I agree with you. Yes. This no, because of how I kind of thought about this episode to begin with, which was like, hey, a reminder where we're at. He is responsible for the child. And he also went through one formative transformational journey, and look at all the things that he has learned from that.
Oh, I do think it was for the audience what you said, though. I do think it was for the audience reminding us that he can't do this by himself, because he was so much he very much believed in himself to be able to conquer this thing. And yet he had to pull in other people, and he knew how important it was to pull in other groups and other people that didn't get along. And it was a reminder for the audience to say, like, yeah, you can't do this alone. Like, you
need community, and you need
exactly
different types of people working together to build a better tomorrow.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's what definitely.
I have a lot of meta thoughts about this whole thing, but
I think that's where that's coming from. It's your meta thoughts, and I love that.
But in general, it is it's like a recap of what he went through last season, and resetting us to say, oh, look, he's already going into the journey. He's straight up going into the underworld or the unknown. He's there already. Fast forward to that point.
Yeah, because when he almost died in the previous episode, basically, I think it was the previous episode, in the previous chapter, he accepted death. Like, he fully accepted it. And when you do that as a hero, and when you do that for the right reasons, like when you do that as like, I am going to sacrifice myself for others or whatever, you step further into the realm of like beyond life. It's beyond the living.
You become the master of life and death.
That's the goal. That's the goal is becoming the master of life and death. And so there's a great quote I love from the Hero with a Thousand Faces that actually Campbell quoted from somebody else. I don't have the name right here right now, but it's okay. Just word search it. I swear you'll be able to find it. It's no creature can attain a higher grade of nature without ceasing to exist. Which is really intense. Like,
yeah,
that's really, really intense. But I mean, to remind people, you have to live. Like, you have to live.
Yeah.
In order to die. Like, you don't choose to die. You choose life. And then life does with you what it does. And I think the beauty of being a hero in these stories is that Din specifically, you know, he's not allowed to die on his own terms, right?
Yep.
He has to live. He has to live. And then in this particular episode, he doesn't say, oh, I'll die. Like, they literally tell you afterwards, he's like, oh, I had a plan. I just didn't like have the time to explain it.
Yeah.
He's like, and he tells the guy, like, just in case anything does happen though, like, take care of the child. Like,
yeah,
please. But he knows now. He knows he has gone to the point where death is not an obstacle for him. Death is another place. It's another journey. It's a different step. And he knows that now because he got a glimpse of what that is.
Yeah.
It's not that he wants to die. It's that he is not afraid of death. And that is a beautiful, beautiful thing, I think, because they're really, really, really showing people you have to choose life. You have to choose to live.
And that's significant as well, because like from a Campbellian perspective, Campbell viewed as soon as you have a child, your life is their life. Their life is the one that is important. Your life no longer matters.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're living your life to protect that life.
Yeah.
And to nurture that life. And the children are important.
The children are important.
The foundlings are the future.
But, you know, again, like what can they be if they don't have your guidance?
Yeah.
And
it's still important for you to live, but the focus is not on you any longer. It's now on the child.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of it. It's a different phase of life. I think that's the beauty of it, is that you can literally see it with Din, is that it's a different phase in his journey, and it's there.
It's new and it's interesting, and they're showing us and like not telling us. They're showing us with all of this symbolism, which makes me feel like warm and gooey on the inside.
Oh, what a weird way to explain it.
It makes me feel good. It really does.
Yeah, it makes me feel good too. It's hitting all the right psychological notes. And
yeah.
Speaking of that one last thing I wanted to say.
I'm warm and gooey like a cookie, like a warm cookie.
Not like the inside of a
krayt dragon? No.
A krayt dragon.
No.
Oh, Lord. Okay.
Good and tasty like a cookie, not a krayt dragon. Thank you.
There you go. So, there's one thing else I wanted to say about this particular part of Din getting swallowed by the dragon, which was that in Campbellian terms, like tons of heroes get eaten and swallowed by monsters and dragons and whatnot. It's really kind of a fun thing that he talks a lot about in A Hero with a Thousand Faces. And what it represents is, again, self-annihilation and being born again through the process of going inward. You're not going outward. You're not fighting external foes. You are being swallowed. Mm-hmm. And when the hero disappears, it is like, and Campbell talks about this, and I think it's beautiful. It's like when a person goes into the temple to worship. Mm. They disappear for a minute because going into a temple is about being with yourself and your God.
Yeah.
And when you come out, you're different. You're reborn. So when a hero is swallowed by a creature, they are coming to terms with their God. And when they come out, they're a different person. It's very interesting. It's so very interesting. So there's a lot of stuff about that in myth, and a lot about like getting, swallowed. I love the word swallowed is really kind of fun. But yeah, so that's, and I have some theories about like where that's going to go later, but
we'll get to that. But first, just briefly on pearls, like from
briefly, I have a lot on pearls.
Oh. Fine. No, just go ahead. Okay. So on to pearls, because the pearl itself found inside of the krayt dragon was the treasure that was like there for the community of the Sand People. That was a treasure for them. There is a KOTOR tie, Legends tie. Krayt dragon pearls were something significant. In fact, Knights of the Old Republic, Revan had one. He had a krayt dragon pearl. But from like a mythological perspective, they're heavily tied with dragons, especially in Asian traditions. And they're actually like sort of the seed of their power. Their celestial power is in the pearl. Mm-hmm. And that's like really, really important.
Yeah. And with a lot of Asian dragons, like Japanese and Korean and some Chinese dragons, they tend to be sitting on the dragon visually on the chin, like hanging on the chin, or in their hand. Yeah. And so there's always there's always this visual and within the mythology of it, of two dragons, both with pearls in their hands, circling each other, one representing the sun and one representing the moon. Mm-hmm. And that pearl is kind of that balancing factor where one of them is dark and one of them is light. And
it's a very yin-yang.
It's a yin-yang symbol. Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff in that mythology about it. But I also wanted to go into, because obviously I have more about like the Campbellian mythology. Mm-hmm. And also I delved into the alchemical psychology of all of this, like element wise.
Yep.
Because when I saw the pearl, I was like, what? That's not an egg. So I found this good quote in Creative Mythology written by Campbell that said, this is talking about this. By the way, this is talking very, very, very much about Western mythology. But in this particular spot, there's a quote that says, "The Father is identified in his mind with the mystery of substance. The all is in the all in the all of us, the same ubiquitous presence that in alchemical terms may be represented as the pearl or treasure in the sea." And so this got me like thinking about weird stuff, because I was like, okay, what is this? And this is basically saying like all the thing that is in everyone, the one thing that is in everyone, it's a mysterious substance, it's ubiquitous, it's the treasure in the sea, it's water. Obviously pearls are made from water. So I delved into the Jungian.
It's very Venus in the ocean feeling.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. And actually, so I delved into like kind of the alchemical meaning of it, and pearls are actually associated with like Aphrodite. But they're also, so I'm gonna go back to dragons real quick, because I want to open this up in the correct way, because I don't want to confuse anyone. So what alchemical psychology is, it's the studies of analogies between alchemy, Christian dogma, and psychological symbolism. And if you don't understand what any of that means, all you have to know is that it's all just symbolism. It's all symbolism going down to like the basic elements. And it's pre-science, but people still use it and people still study it because it's all about symbols. It's in our basic psychology. And when I was looking into this, I found that dragons, very specifically, have different types of elements that they are associated with. And specifically, wingless dragons are associated with their alchemical symbol is sulfur, because winged dragons.
Yeah.
I got on this whole trip because I was like, wait, the dragon from Myths and Legends in the Star Wars book that I read, that one had wings.
Yep.
So I got on this whole thing. I'm like, what does that mean for it to have wings or not have wings? And I found out that a winged dragon is very different, very spiritual. It's of the air.
Yeah.
A wingless dragon is of the earth. And its alchemical symbol is sulfur, which is associated with dryness, heat, masculinity. And when it's associated with the human body, it represents the soul.
Whoa.
And yeah.
Back to our ego death.
Yes. Yes. Now, a really, really, really fun little Easter egg in here is that pearls are associated. Pearls basically represent quicksilver, or quicksilver is basically an ancient word for mercury.
Yeah.
It is now understood as the element of mercury in alchemical psychology. And mercury is wetness, cold, femininity. This comes from the idea, a pearl is created from water, right? It takes a long time.
And Aphrodite and that, because she would always like create pearls when she was the pearl within the clamshell that would rise from the ocean.
Yeah, exactly. So
are we saying that he
Hold on.
Okay.
Hold on. I know you're getting to the meta. Hold on. Mercury also represents the mind as well as the state that could transcend death.
Oh.
And it is what is left over from the carcass that will outlast the body. It will outlast the soul of that creature that was on the earth. So there's 1,000 different ways that you can take this. First of all,
what is going on with this show? Oh my God.
I don't know why they picked a pearl of all things.
Well, I mean, it is like, something that exists, though, in canon.
I know. That's the crazy part. It exists in canon. But they could have made it shiny. They could have made it like in Legends, the pearl was
It was like bioluminescent almost, like it glowed.
Yes.
But it's a freaking like actual giant pearl.
Exactly.
What? Unless the prop department was like, pearl, got it. You know?
Oh, yeah.
But there's so many deliberate choices in this show that, like, I don't think so.
I think it was very deliberate. And I think the psychological implications of it shone through because
so you're saying
pearls are feminine.
He's missing his feminine, and the feminine is something that he is missing.
Mando, what did he do? He took a gigantic chunk that was basically the size of that pearl.
Yeah.
And took a big chunk of the meat, put that on the back of his bike.
He took the man meat and left the pearl behind. Okay.
Exactly.
Good job, Mando. That's exceptional, Ty. You knocked it out of the park with the research today.
I dug a lot. And let me tell you, I'm going to bring some more of this alchemic, like, psychological stuff.
Unbelievably excited. I love alchemical psychology.
It's so fascinating. I am so interested in it.
It's so cool. I talk a lot with Nat Fox about it. Other stuff. She is very, very familiar with a lot of the alchemical psychologists from the 1990s.
I love it. I love it. That's so cool.
It's dope. Okay, so we'll just write that one down into our speculation area because, again, on top of all of the other things that he is missing, he takes the meat and not the pearl. But he promised the pearl. But yet he was still able to walk away with the meat. Why? So we shall discover this season, hopefully.
Yes.
Anything else on pearls?
That was my big
I love
thing.
it. I love it so much.
There's some other stuff that was in the Bible, but I was like, it's not even that fun because like this stuff is way much more fun.
Okay, this is gonna be a side rant. Not rant. Because we're about to get into the meta section of this, but it's applicable. I love how things on the surface seem like a reference to KOTOR or to Legends or to something else. And then they're just like, oh yeah, but there's this slathering of symbolism on top of it. It makes me so unbelievably happy.
That's this show. That's what it does.
This show is just so layered and amazing and wonderful. And I'm so glad that we get to talk about it every single week, Ty.
I'm so excited. So cool. So right. Meta.
I talked a little bit about, Mando kind of taking on this role of Quill. And what's fascinating is there's moments in the episodes in the first season where Quill talks about stuff, and it sounds like he's not just talking about stuff that's happening.
Yeah.
Right? And go back to, season 1 episodes if you haven't listened to those with Alex Kane. They were amazing. I had so much fun with Alex talking about The Mandalorian season 1. But we realized, especially as the season went on and we got to see more of Quill, that what he says and what he means are operating on two kind of liminal layers. And like Mando talks about, they approach the Sarlacc pit, the Sarlacc cave, and it's like, this is a Sarlacc cave. Sarlaccs are mothers. They're traditionally women. Like feminine. That's canon in there. Yeah. And we find out that the dragon has displaced the feminine. It has eaten the feminine and taken over it. And it's become such a hazard to the societies that live nearby that the Sand People have figured out a sacrificial feeding schedule to keep the dragon appeased. But what other choice do they have, right? Mm-hmm. The dragon sleeps and then wakes to eat. And that's part of their method to keep the dragon appeased. And they'll feed the dragon, right? You feed the dragon to keep it appeased. Mm-hmm. But then they realize that they cannot keep on going and feeding the dragon. And so how do they fix this whole problem? They end up feeding the dragon something, guys, as something it likes, but it destroys it from the inside. When Ty and I started to, when we watched the trailer at Celebration and we talked about it there, when I covered the show with Alex, and when we covered it on our Power of Myth and Symbolism episode on The Mandalorian, we have always said this show was a Trojan horse show. And guess what happens to the, very ornery troll-like male dragon? It eats a Trojan bantha and explodes from the inside. This show is telling us that it is going to change what we think it's going to be for us by feeding us something that looks familiar, but transforming us into something else. A pearl, femininity.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's all there. It's so funny because I'm so much more reluctant to accept it now because of 9. And, I'm very much just as skeptical and just as heartbroken and untrustworthy as so many other people are. And I hope people understand that. But I'm here to enjoy Mando. I'm here to analyze Mando. And from what I'm seeing,
yeah,
I can believe that I'm okay in doing that. I can believe
it's a Trojan bantha.
It's a Trojan bantha. I'm down with it. If the Trojan bantha signifies that the creators that are left, the ones that stuck it out, right? Yeah, they understand, and that they're going to get into the gullet of certain people and certain parts of this fandom and certain parts of basically just this franchise and blow it up from the inside. I'm fully down with that.
Yeah.
I am absolutely here for that, because at the end of the day, and that having that tiny thing at the end, having that pearl shown.
It's like the pearl of hope.
Yeah.
Right? It's hope.
It's hope. Again, going back to the beginning, right? It's a weird thing that showed up. I was like, what? Why?
Yeah.
I don't understand. But in everything in the show, if I have any feeling like that at all whatsoever, I go, all right, I got to research.
Yeah. What does this mean on a deeper layer? Because what we find is like how Quill talked on 2 layers. I have lived 3 generations under the Empire. It's like, who are you, Quill? Are you somebody that understands what it's like to like trudge away at a story and try to keep a world? You want to be your own person. And now we have the Mando taking on the mantle of this very meta-textual conversation with, Cobb and the Sand People, and understanding that they cannot continuously feed the dragon the way that they have been feeding the dragon. They must come together. Disparate people come together to try and solve the problem. Feed it that Trojan bantha and blow it up from the inside and build something new.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's not about just destroying the dragon. You don't destroy the dragon. You just, just like the Sarlacc was replaced. You're just kind of pushing it aside, and the next thing is going to come in and take its place.
Yeah. But now, now we have a pearl. We have hope.
Yeah, we got hope.
All right, let's do some speculation. And again, we could be totally wrong with some...
Oh. We've always been wrong. Sorry.
Hello,
well,
sorry.
Not always, but...
We could be totally wrong.
We've been wrong.
Yeah.
That's all I wanted to say. We've been wrong, but
We have been wrong, but
not totally wrong though.
Oh, I have a really good success ratio when I think about things mythically. Like even Dark Union. Like what the hell was what? Of things.
It was there, but it was wrong.
Yeah, it's like very clear. What did you have to? What monkey paw wish did you make? Anyways, no. Let's do some speculation for the season. We've already kind of said what was set up from this episode's perspective, and we expect those things to be answered. Right? They're questions that were asked in the episode from throughout the episode textually and from a meta perspective, right? So we've already covered that, but
so there's one I wanted to start off with, which is such a weird one that I don't have a lot of stock in it. Like I'm not saying this is going to happen, but I find it really interesting that because Mando was swallowed, typically in myths and in stories where the hero is swallowed initially, they swallow power later.
Ooh.
Yeah. So
what does that mean for us in the Star Wars universe?
It's not something that's used a lot in Star Wars because typically heroes don't eat in Star Wars. Like you don't see it a lot. And on top of that, like eating is different than swallowing. Like swallowing is a powerful physical thing that you do mythically where you take something into yourself without chewing, right? You don't process it. So if you like raw food, like typically, like when we didn't process our food before we ate it, we just chewed it and swallowed it.
Mm-hmm.
But processing our food, like baking it and cutting it and,
like what Baby Yoda, the child, does to the frog.
Exactly. Oh my God. Thank you. That's perfect. Yeah. So Baby Yoda, like swallowing the frog is mythic because it's a powerful action that takes power directly into you. You're not processing anything. You're taking the full power of the frog. You're not like killing it beforehand, right? You're not breaking it down. And I do want to add this little weird thing in here because I think for women, I think it's important to add this in here. Swallowing something as a woman, let your mind go there. It's
exactly what you're imagining.
Woman, it's exactly what you're imagining. The woman typically is impregnated through that, right? Yeah. Through myth, like as a god or goddess, like a girl, like a young woman will swallow something that belongs to a god and become, pregnant with the child. Or pregnant with his child. So, for a male to do the same, it's the same thing, but it doesn't end in impregnation. It doesn't end with.
You're given a gift of power, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. I found it odd that Pele said, if it starts to bud or divide, I want its offspring.
Oh my God. Yeah, that kind of freaked me out too. I totally forgot about that.
Yeah. I thought that was it was such an odd way of putting it because asexual reproduction is like something that is very science fiction, right? So creators want to remove the feminine, right? And the power of creation that feminine offers in that. And so they try to take it from the normal, natural or whatever place and create robots or monsters like Frankenstein or cloning, things like that. It's a very science fiction way of trying to become a creator without having a woman involved.
Yeah, and without having the ritual, right? Because you have to take the ritual away of that's really interesting.
I thought it was odd.
Huh. I wonder where that's going to go, if that's going to come up again.
I don't know. I just needed to like point that out because it was like something that it was like, that was weird.
Cool.
But swallowing power, you end up actually being given basically a new power.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm wondering if it could be related to something associated with him being able to successfully wield a lightsaber to fight Moff Gideon.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he needs to become a wielder of a lightsaber.
Well, we saw with the Cobb's character, he reluctantly, he did not want to drink the stinky thing, right?
But he did.
And then he did at the end. So it's like, what if Din is faced with a similar type of thing where it's more symbolic than it is very literal, where he doesn't want to like eat of something that maybe like the child eats. And then finally he gives into it. But that's kind of just symbolic of saying, he'll take on that responsibility. Or
it could be that the child needs to have a meal with somebody like
the
Jedi or somebody that he doesn't trust.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's interesting. Symbols to look out for. And yeah. We both, before we recorded the episode, talked about how there's still the missing feminine to Din Djarin. And I mentioned Cersei as a temptress, right? And he's going to run into the goddess, because I don't think Omera was the goddess, and the goddess often forms a dark feminine aspect because he is too good, too masculine, and is missing aspects of himself in the story, and so he needs to have that reflected and projected on somebody. And so I think we're going to actually meet a new character. And you and I talked about that before this. So what do you think?
Yeah. I mean, I like Omera a lot. Like, I think she's a good love interest for him in the long term, in the long run.
Like, yeah.
But I think that there needs to be a feminine character who is at odds with him, because like Omera was very like similar. She was so similar to him, too much so for the show, because the show itself needs a feminine that is dark, and Din needs a feminine that is dark. Yeah, like Ventress style. Yeah, not. I hope it's not Ventress, because I'm so sick of seeing the same characters, but
new.
I don't think it can be, can it?
Yeah. No.
Yeah. So
it cannot canonically
cannot be her. Yeah. So
unfortunately, Ventress is no longer with us.
Yeah. That's what I thought.
Yeah.
So I definitely think it's going to be a similar character, and it would be nice if it was a new character.
Would it be cool if it was a dark force user?
Yeah. That's what I was picturing, because I was picturing a powerful character that's not like a Cara Dune. Because like if she was dark, she would have to be like a Kira, right? She was a Kira, like really smart, really capable, not a force user. But I don't think they would do that. I think that they would do like a dark sorceress character to balance out the fact that like Din Djarin doesn't have force abilities. Like, he's very physical, like but he's also very like, he's attached to that creed. So he would understand the religious aspects of
and the commitment associated with that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And the rule, hey, think about the rule of two as well, right?
Yeah.
That could be a thing as well. Like, that could be, like a clan of two.
Yeah.
Rule of two. Like, that could be
it would be interesting
connecting thing.
The types of, like, because he's looking for the Jedi, right? That's what he's been told to find. He's looking for his people, the child's people. It would be interesting if he found a dark temptress that wanted to take it, wanted him, but not the child.
Oh.
Right? Because that would play into the concept of Cersei, right? The mission is separate from, what Cersei wants, which is companionship.
Yeah, I like that.
Right? It's cool. I don't know. We'll see. And then
I like all these iterations in my head. I like all of the possibilities.
I'm going to write some of this as fic. No, just kidding. No, I may. It depends on my time. I also think that the child, because of what has been laid out in this episode, he doesn't fully understand the cost of raising the child, right? We've seen that. It's been textually told to us by characters saying, hey, dude, bringing your child to an MMA fight? Come on. Pally's there. Hey, I'll take care of him while you go on your adventure. And he's like, no, child stays with me. But out in the sun, Yoda's species is basically a frog. He's got a sunburn. Manda, we got some splaining to do. Seriously, what did you do to him? Did you even give him his sippy cup and his cup of Cheerios? On that long journey? He's just in the little backpack. How are you any different than the speeder bike patrol unit that kept him in the baggie?
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
He will face some frickin' comeuppance with regards to something he must sacrifice for the child. It's going to be massive.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be something. It's got to be something like the Beskar, or he has to, he finally gets the Darksaber. He has to sacrifice the Darksaber. It has to be something mythically huge, worth something to everyone.
Could be his helmet. I don't know. I don't think they'll do that just I don't think they'll do that because of how they're producing the show. But it's going to be something big. And then big. I covered this in an article I wrote for whattheforce.ca. So the site, we've been starting to do some articles on different things. But I wrote about how when you have this sort of dad-focused story, it's like a male nurturing fantasy. And in some ways, one of the kind of trials or lessons that dads need to learn is that their child is separate from them. And we see that the child is not separate from him in his mind. The child does what he does. He's the boss. He is the person that's in charge. And it's a big lesson that he needs to learn. And so the child is going to, again, scare him with the power that the child wields.
Yeah.
It's going to remind him that the child is a separate entity. And although he is there to protect the child is not him. It's just a very important psychological lesson that parents need to go through, because for much of especially infant life, we look at children as an extension of ourselves. And when they start to separate, we try to wrangle them back in, because of protection. But it's actually about the fact that we need to grow and understand that that person is a separate person.
Yeah.
So it's really, really important. And we're going to probably see that this season.
Yeah, definitely.
Because of what has been set up in the first episode.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else, Ty?
It's all I got.
I am so happy we get to do this together.
Yeah, me too. I love it. I'm so glad. I'm glad we could summarize everything in the last few hours or so and get it recorded. Thank God.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for coming in and waiting very patiently for our response and our deep dive into what this all means. Make sure to like and subscribe and check out Mandalorian Season 1 if you haven't, from What the Force. Also, we did a whole month of Mandalorian articles on whattheforce.ca. Make sure to check those out. And Ty has done some amazing videos on her channel. So I'll let you say where people can find you.
Yeah. They can find my channel is Wit and Folly, WIT and FOLLY on YouTube. And then you can find me on Twitter at @wit_folly. You can also find me on my personal at black_TYM.
Awesome. And make sure to check out all of our episodes that we've done together, which are primarily our Power of Myth and Symbolism episodes, where we look at Star Wars from a mythic and a symbolic perspective, many times with a Joseph Campbell lens. Thanks for checking us out. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to What the Force. I'm Marie-Claire Gould, your host. Our music is orchestral music composed by Christy Carew for What the Force. We have a Patreon at patreon.com/whattheforce. We thank all our patrons, especially those who love and are obsessed with What the Force: Brad, Cheryl, Melody, Night Huntress, In Wild Space, Felicia, How Rude, Anna Perez, Macau Mom, Neil, Joe Allen D, Christian Luca, Josh Johnson, and Scott C. Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube or leave a 5-star review on iTunes or other podcast apps. It helps others find the show. Check out our new channel on YouTube, What the Fiction. You can connect with us on Twitter at What the Force Show, What the Force Podcast on Facebook, or on our website, where we have expanded our content to include reviews, metas, and articles, whattheforce.ca, or on our Discord. Links are in the liner note. Feel free to reach out and start a conversation. Cheers.